and welcome to another episode of Unboxing Women, where we explore the gender gap in the music and entertainment industry. If you're active in the music business, an independent artist, a musician, or just curious about how it all works, then this pod is for you. My name is Dana Rex, and with me is my friend Micah Rose, and we are both independent recording artists based in Europe. After having been called a bitch for knowing what we want, we were fed up and decided to be such a bitch and reveal what really goes on behind the scenes. So you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platform and on our YouTube channel. Today, we are chatting with Liam Klenk. Liam, welcome to the show.
Hello, Dana. Thank you.
So Liam Klenk is an author, a trans activist, and an inspirational speaker, and published his first book and memoir, Paralian, Not Just Transgender, in 2016, which won 5 international book awards. Impressive.
Yeah.
He tells the story of his journey through gender reassignment and all the challenges that come with it. He confronts common stereotypes and exposes the reality of what it means to be transgender in our world today. Born in Central Europe, he has lived in 11 countries on several continents, where he has always been engaged in creative pursuits and has worked in multiple theatre and contemporary circus shows, both as a performer and behind the scenes as stage and production manager, or even an aquatic performance trainer. I first heard about Liam when he spoke on a trans awareness panel in November 2022, and I was immediately swept away by the amazing and also very shocking story that he has to tell. So Liam, welcome to the show. How are you today? There we
have the first cat.
Yes, as promised, he has to be in the picture. So yeah, he's my little assistant. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm very honored. Yeah, how should I start? Maybe really by pointing out why I ended up writing a book. It's something that when I was very young already was always on my mind, because my life was from the very beginning quite turbulent and crazy. Started by being given away at birth into an orphanage to multiple challenges, and then finding out I'm transgender through puberty. And all my life, I realized I really want to help people by speaking up and by telling my story, because I'm a bit of an old guy. I'm 53 now. And I mean, when I was in the situation of finding out who I am, there was no internet. There was nothing in the media. Nobody talked about transgender. I had no help from anybody, school psychologists, parents, anybody, because there was no awareness. And that was an incredibly lonely and difficult journey. And I just really wanted to make sure that doesn't happen to anybody else, for as much as I can influence that and help that. And that was my main reason why I then wanted to write my book. He's quite the actor, isn't he? Yeah,
very good.
And as you said, I published that then in 2016, and at first I was very shy, stepping onto stages and actually talking to people live. But then a friend of mine quoted Spider-Man at me and was like, "Liam, with great power comes great responsibility." I was like, yeah, you're right. And then I started being on panels and doing keynote speeches, and really trying to make a difference and actively leaning out of the window as much as I could.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I'm sure you've touched a lot of lives.
Yeah, definitely. I found the most interesting, because obviously we're talking about the music and entertainment business on our pod, that you've been you've had so many different roles in all these different places. Tell us a little bit more about all the places that you've worked. Because you've been in circuses, I believe.
Yes, yeah. I mean, before I was in circuses, I studied in Zurich at the Art Institute here to be a photographer. But I'm very much a team person. I really like to create something in a team. And so I gave up on professional photography. It was just such a lonely road. I didn't want to continue on that. And then I ended up working for a management consulting company for a little while, and then went as a diving instructor to the Maldives for 5 years. And then in the middle of the jungle in the Philippines, met somebody from Cirque du Soleil who told me, Liam, they are building this visionary new circus show in Macau, China, and they're looking for aquatic coaches and basically diving instructors to train the acrobats of the show. Would you be interested? And I was like, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
The answer is
Sign me up.
yes.
And yeah, I
Wow.
mean, I love diving, and I've always wanted to work in the entertainment industry, specifically circus. And so I
Really?
was like, oh my God, yeah, count me in. I'll come over. And I have to admit, my head was full of dreams and ideals when it comes to circus. And holy shit, that was all wiped off the table
Oh no.
very quickly. It was really, I mean, I started in Belgium, in the TV studios in Lint,
Oh
close to
yes.
Antwerp.
Yeah, I know them
I was
well.
there. Yeah, I was there for a year with Dragon Entertainment. Dragon is basically Franco Dragon. He died recently, but he is the creator of some of the most famous Cirque du Soleil shows.
Yeah.
And then Cirque du Soleil became a bit too boring for him, so he created his own company and became one of Cirque du Soleil's greatest competitors. And
Okay. Yeah, because I said
absolute
earlier, I said
mastermind.
Cirque du Soleil. It looks like Cirque du Soleil, but with water.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is. There is a link. Okay.
Yes, there is a link. Like he's really I think he was one of the founders of Cirque du Soleil originally, and the first 10, 15 Cirque du Soleil shows were created by him.
Wow.
And they are probably really the best shows that Cirque du Soleil ever made. And ever since Franco left, I would say, I mean, the shows are still good, but there's some of that genius missing that he brought into it. And then when he founded his own company, like for example, the first water show he created was in Las Vegas. And
Yes, I remember
that
that.
was still for Cirque du Soleil. And then he created his own after he left Cirque du Soleil, which was called Le Rêve. And it closed down during COVID, but both shows ran very successfully through the years. And I think is still running again now after COVID, and super successful, like always sold out for like 15 years now or longer. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And so in Macau, China, the thing that I stumbled over, he decided to build the biggest show in the world at the time. And I think this venture cost like 300 million US dollars. And
Okay.
it was a purpose-built theater with 2,000 seats, a theater in the round, with an enormous 10-meter deep pool, and then a stage made out of lifts, elevators, basically, that could go up and down. Well, lifts rather, not elevators. And so you could have a flat stage or a very shallow, watery stage or very deep. And on the bottom of that pool, we had all the props were parked there. And there was a team of 20 scuba divers that permanently worked in that pool and made sure that all the props were on time and were maintained all the time, and also during the show were brought on stage on time. Plus, we needed to train all the acrobats to come on stage from under the water, which was a very special way of doing things. And I was one of the trainers. And I think at the time when I did that job, there were only like maybe 20, 30 people in the world who had ever done that job before. And they were all in Las Vegas, and they then came to Belgium and trained us. But the absolute nightmare of the whole thing was I had, when I thought of circus, I thought of artists. I hadn't realized that circus is mostly ex-athletes who
Okay.
are then trained to become performers. So that entire diversity and, sort of flamboyant, like rainbow of colors that I had imagined did not exist. Actually, it was a very homophobic environment.
Okay.
And it was all, well, mostly at least. And it was also that's, I think, the nature of those very big circus shows. Basically, for all the acrobats and all the technicians that go there, that is where they want to go all their lives. That's what they work towards all their lives. So once they've made it there, they want to make their mark.
I
So I
see.
have never been stabbed into my back so often in my life. Like, it was
Oh,
Oh, okay.
really, like
jeez.
everyone wanted to make sure their name was noticed, and everybody was very aggressively pushing. I think the acrobats, not so much. They were just happy to have reached the top of the mountain, basically, and now be in the world class of acrobats. But I would say the technicians and the management of these shows, I worked for several, it was the same throughout. It was very aggressive and a little bit like swimming in a shark pool that was infested with very aggressive sharks. So
Okay. Interesting.
and yeah, it was really a crazy thing. And I mean, when I started in Belgium, I was already bullied half to death. And I'm quite a soft-spoken person. And in that environment, my soft-spokenness was continuously misunderstood as weakness.
Mm.
And so people were really trying to like act on that, and a lot of people thought I was incapable of gaining the trust of the artists, etc. Whereas in reality, I ended up being one of the people the artists trusted the most,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, it's
they
the other
knew
way
they,
around.
obviously, yeah.
yeah, because I'm very empathetic, and I listened to them. I made sure they were safe. I defended their safety towards upper management as well without being afraid. But it was really, I don't know, for me, it was a very traumatizing time, especially with Dragon Entertainment, I must say. And then it got even worse when we went to Macau. Because first in Belgium, I was one of 5 trainers who trained the performers. And when we arrived in Macau, there were 20 more divers, and they were all ex-soldiers or had been hired from oil platforms. I mean, you can imagine the testosterone in the room was exploding, right? And it was all alpha males. And then there was little transgender me who was like, who? It was, it was really scary as shit. And
Yeah.
then it was the first time in my life that I was in a locker room every day with people like that, and with the aggression and with all the posturing that happens there, which I guess a regular male who's grown up with this is maybe used to, but I was not. And then it was one thing that I experienced, which really freaked me out, but it was a big learning curve, was that every single of these companies I worked for, including Dragon Entertainment, thought, because they have such a diverse cast and crew coming from all kinds of backgrounds and from all kinds of countries, that there was no need to talk about diversity.
Yeah.
And I noticed, really, the problem is, if it's never something you talk about, that creates the most toxic work environment you can possibly imagine, because you shut down all discussions and all possibility for help and support before it even starts.
Yeah.
Because
And
it's just not something that's on the table. So if you have special needs, or you're being bullied and you want to talk with somebody, there's simply nobody who's interested in listening to you.
and is this because when people like that talk about diversity, they're thinking of simply different, nationalities. They're not thinking about gender.
I think mostly yes, but I think they must be thinking about gender as well. The thing in the entertainment industry that I found was, well, in the circus industry, let's minimize it and not be too general, is the circus industry is very, very small.
Yeah.
It's a very small industry that basically nobody really cares about what happens behind the scenes. So there is no help and
It's
support there
seriously
either.
marginalized.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the whole music and entertainment industry is it's not like the corporate world that we know, which has an HR department
Yeah.
and all of that. I mean, even music, there's nobody. It's really fend for yourself. There's no departments. There's nothing really.
Yeah.
So I understand what you're getting at. Yeah.
I mean, we even had an HR and everything, but it was just in that industry, basically, everybody's trying to make it, and everybody knows they have to go through hell before they're accepted. So
Yeah.
everybody automatically
Yeah.
accepts being bullied. Everybody accepts working for very low salaries. Everybody accepts all of those or having almost no social security, having no, being thrown out into the street within a week or two, or even a day or two sometimes without warning. All those things are just accepted and normal. Like, for example, when COVID happened, Cirque du Soleil closed down shop within 1 week and everybody was on the street without social security.
Yeah.
I mean, and that is something, in any
Yeah.
other industry that would be an absolute no-go. And there it just happened. And for everybody, it's like, yeah, that's just how the industry is. And then after COVID, everybody just came back.
Yeah.
But, what happened in between, nobody was interested. And I think, everything like women's rights, diversity, like LGBTQIA plus, whatever it is, there's nothing there. There's no education. There's maybe the odd, like maybe a little bit of a training to subconscious bias, but it's all very superficial. And really, there is no understanding and no help. And I think the worst is there is no neutral people or departments where you can go and place your concerns without it backfiring for you. And I mean, I've really seen like so much, like so many misogynists as well, in that job, so many women who try to make their marks as technicians. And I think I'm really mostly talking about management and technicians, because in the artist world, it was different and they were more looking out for each other. And because they're so important for the show, then everybody was always catering to their well-being. Whereas for me, it was always like Jekyll and Hyde. On stage, everything looks beautiful. Backstage, it's just ugly as hell.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that was my experience off and on wherever I worked for about 11 years.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's a long time to also tough that out, though. Yeah.
It is, yeah.
I loved my job. I mean, I really, really loved it.
Well, I bet.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds amazing, and I think that just the doing of it is great. It's indeed, when all the stuff surrounding it is just so hard. But you were also talking about the facilities, for example. So there were no shower curtains that you mentioned last time we spoke.
Yes. Yes, I mean, for me, that was horrible. Like, I mean, I'm a transgender man without a penis, and there I am with 30 people who have all been in the army or on an oil platform. And they're literally walking around the locker room showing the length of their penises to each other.
God. Do they really do that?
Yeah, they really did that.
Why do they do that?
I have no idea. Honestly, to me, that is so alien. But I mean, so then there's me. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And then, I mean, I would like to take a shower, right? Because I'm working 12, 14 hours and in very chemically enriched water in the pool there. So I would like to sort of do the same as everybody else. And I talked over months and months and months and even years. I kept bringing up that I really want to have shower curtains so that I can shower in privacy as well. And it was always just declined. Like, no, we don't need that. No. And there was no way for me to get that, to be introduced and for anybody to understand that this was a very important thing. So I was basically terrified the entire time I worked there. I always came in very early, then hid somewhere in a corner, quickly changed into my scuba diving clothes. And then at the end of the day, I waited for a moment when not so many people were in the locker room, again, changed somewhere in a corner and felt so vulnerable. And I mean, I also didn't really dare at that time to openly come out. Over time, it happened naturally. And then I learned that I, too, had quite a lot of prejudice. Like, I would say half of those ex-soldiers and oil platform guys really didn't care that I was transgender or not.
Oh,
But
okay.
still, I don't think that they would have been comfortable with a man without a penis in their locker room, you know.
Yeah, I have
So,
not. That's a good
yeah.
question. Indeed, so they didn't know you were transgender.
In the beginning, not, but then it slowly came
Slowly
out more
came out.
because I have very big scars where the surgery was to remove my boobs, and so those are very visible.
Yeah.
And so people asked questions, and over time, I mean, at first I was just terrified because it was based on when I started working in Belgium, I was bullied nonstop, and so it sort of made me very shy and afraid from the very beginning. And then my boss I had in Belgium kept telling me that I'm too soft-spoken and nobody will respect me and accept me in Macau. And so when I came to Macau, I was so full of fear. So it took me a good 1 or 2 years of those 4 years I worked there to dare to step by step feel a little bit more confident about
Yeah,
everything.
because the other person had told you like, oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, so he had.
Yeah.
It's like putting your own
Prejudice.
prejudice onto somebody
Yeah.
else. Yeah.
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 And then I don't know how it is in the music industry usually, but one thing that also struck me incredibly in the circus industry was that the level of nepotism was something I had never seen before. Oh my God. Incredible. I was like, seriously, so you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
right?
Yes,
Like
we
people
do.
who have no idea what they're doing, but they're best friends with the person who is hiring,
Yeah.
get hired, and then also mostly the emphasis is on hiring men. And then if there is for example, a very talented young woman who is, for example, an amazing sound engineer, but maybe the guy who's hiring doesn't trust women to do the same job, then she just gets ignored. She doesn't she isn't even considered. And then somebody totally incompetent is put in that place,
Yes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
everybody's like, oh my God, how did that happen?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then instead of then taking the competent person, again, they just sort of probably fire that incompetent person within a few days or months, and then they hire the next incompetent person, and you're like, you guys are not learning,
No,
No.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with, like, you're talking about sound engineers. We have so many episodes where we're talking about sound
Oh,
engineers,
God.
where we have seen and heard things, that are quite unbelievable, really.
Yeah, no, sound
So-
engineers come up with, well, good sound engineers obviously excluded, but the sound engineers we're talking about, they come up with the craziest things. And they're like, it's all your fault that you're sounding shit. And I'm like, no, it's literally your job to make me sound good.
Exactly.
I did my end. I practiced,
Yeah.
I rehearsed. I'm a good artist. You're making me sound shit.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
It's-
audacity.
That's the audacity,
Yeah.
isn't it? Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I actually reached a peak of nepotism and incompetence surrounding me when I worked on a cruise ship.
a cruise ship.
Before
I would
COVID,
not
I
have thought
managed
that.
a large theater on a cruise ship.
Wonderful.
And there I worked with people from like 77 different countries. And I was basically the main manager for the theater. I ran the show from the booth and controlled everything. And I was in charge of all the cast and crew of the theater. And oh my God, yeah, it was insane there. And it was made even more difficult because there's so many different managers and officers on the ship, and everybody wants to have a say. And so in the end, you have so many people all of a sudden butting in, Like, for example, our cruises were in the Caribbean, and it was in winter time, and I had the aquatic theater, and it was in the back of the ship. So I was very
the
dependent
theater
on the movement
Was
of.
also in the water. Oh God.
Yes, I had the same. It was basically the same theater like in Macau, just a lot smaller, and on a very huge cruise ship. It's one of those huge monsters that have with with staff and guests, you end up having almost 9,000 people on board.
Yeah, was it the Royal Caribbean?
Jeez.
Yes, yeah, I was on the Oasis of the Seas.
Oasis, okay. I didn't know they
Yeah.
had a theater, like a pool theater. Yeah, that's
it's
so
amazing.
annoying when it that you
Yeah.
can't. How? Explain. How do you do a show when there's high winds, Liam?
Well, that's the thing. You don't. But the thing is, basically, it was my responsibility to make the decision, and also
okay.
based on what my artists were telling me. It was my decision to make the decision before each show if the show was going to happen or not. And
Okay.
the cool thing was that I worked together with the captain of the ship. And before each show, because were such high waves, or sometimes it was just swell, but it was like very rocky through most of the winter. So I basically called the captain before every single show. And because I had acts in the air, I had people flying through the air, I had a guy balancing on a high wire, I had people doing synchro swimming in the pool. I had high divers jumping into the pool. Imagine you jump from 20 meters, and the moment you jump, the ship goes this way, and all of a sudden there's no water.
Yeah.
So that's not possible, right? And so,
Oh my God, that's so scary.
yeah, and so I was basically in constant contact with the captains of my artist team. And there was the dance captain, the acro captain, and they were constantly telling me if they're still okay with the conditions or not. And then there were certain visual pointers where you could see, if the water was sloshing over the side of the pool the entire time, you knew this is probably not so great.
Yeah.
And I also had a wind measurement stuff in my in my control booth outside. And when it went above, I think 15 or 18 knots, we couldn't do the high wire, because that would have just swept him off the wire right away.
Wow.
And so I basically called the captain before every show, and he tried his best to reduce the conditions for me. He literally slowed down the ship for me. He sped it up. He changed course. Like one evening, he turned the entire ship around in the other direction.
Oh,
And
nice.
they have stabilizers that they can add, but when they put down the stabilizers, the ship needs a lot more gasoline. So it's much more expensive for the company. But every single time I asked him, could you please extend the stabilizers? He did it. And so I would say half of the time, through the help of the captain, I was able to have the show. But then a lot of the times, if my acrobats told me, sorry, Liam, this is too dangerous, we're not able to do this tonight, then I really just had to cancel the show. And then I had all these very often, incompetent managers butting in, like the hotel manager, the cruise director, the technical director, and they were always, no, you have to do the show. And I was like, guys, it even says in the regulations, it is my final decision, and I'm telling you no. But I had to fight with them almost every day. And, and they did not respect my decision. In the end, they had to, because they couldn't overrule me. But I had to fight through all of their interference every single evening. And I mean, all of us wanted to do the show, it was not a matter of, let's be lazy and hang around a little. It was just like, no, this is not possible. We are risking people's lives.
Yeah, exactly. But what was this? Did they challenge you because of your soft-spokenness? Or this is after the
this is after Macau.
House of the
House
water.
of Dancing Water.
House of Dancing Water. Yes. All right. Or did they know you were transgender? Or
they did not. No, they did not as well. On the ship, not openly. I didn't really hide it either, but I also didn't openly communicate it. So I think most of them did not. I think it might have had to do a little with my soft-spokenness, but I mean, I heard later that to this day, the artists are still telling others, hey, it was really great when Liam was here, because he actually knew what he was doing.
He actually knew what he was doing. I like that one, yes.
But I think it was honestly on the ship again. I had the feeling it was just a lot of nepotism, a lot of people all of a sudden, having a lot of power who usually probably never would. There were people who were in management positions that they didn't have any management training.
Okay.
And in any other place, they would have probably never even made it into that position. But there it happened. And so I don't know. I think probably it was also me not being self-confident enough sometimes. But I was really struggling at that time, with everything. And again, in an environment where I was quite scared. It's actually only since I left the entertainment business and since, basically since COVID shut it all down, that I realized that I spent a whole lifetime letting other people hide me away and hiding myself away. And I spent most of my working life terrified. And only now, basically, I'm at this point where I'm like, no way, I will never let anybody hide me again. But for a long time, I think probably also because I am from an old generation, sort of like, from of people who transitioned. For me, I grew up thinking that's just the status quo. We're not accepted. We're not allowed to take up a lot of space. We need to tread lightly and be mindful of what other people think, and that's what I did most of the time, without realizing how stupid that was and how discriminating against myself.
Can I
And then,
challenge
yeah.
that for a second? Because that sounds
Hmm.
very much like how women are taught to be.
Mm.
So is that something that because you grew up as a female, you transitioned when you were 20, I believe, if I read correctly?
Around 25 even. It was quite
25.
late. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you got the whole upbringing of a woman.
Yes. Well, plus I grew up with adoptive parents who were not very emotionally mature. But I think it's similar to being a woman, but there is an additional layer there. I don't know, have you both seen the documentary Disclosure, which is on
I
Netflix?
have, yeah.
I haven't
You?
yet, no.
Oh, we'll watch it later. It's really good.
Yes.
Yes, I have.
Watch
I
it,
have.
Micah. For me, it was an eye opener because like they talk with all these artists and directors from Hollywood mostly in that documentary, and all of them are transgender. And and then they look at the film history and how transgender people were portrayed. And I grew up with how they were portrayed, and I never realized what was happening because
Yeah.
in almost all, I mean, transgender people were already featuring a lot in a lot of movies way back, but they were always sick or somehow crazy, or they were killed, or there was something wrong with them, and it was always treated in the movies, if they didn't immediately out themselves to everyone, they were branded as liars. So, it automatically gave you this feeling you have this obligation to continuously come out to everybody, otherwise you're betraying people. But even more, in almost all of that movies, whenever somebody like kissed or was in bed with a transgender person and then afterwards found out that person is transgender, they ended up puking their guts out in the movie.
Being disgusted,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
Ace Ventura.
Yeah.
First one, Ace Ventura.
Okay.
I love, like you said too, I also loved the movie, but then you realize watching it now that,
Yeah.
we're all
Yeah.
like more mature and actually know what we're watching.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, why is everybody so, in
Yeah.
Ace Ventura, there's a trans female who is the head of police, and it turns out at the end of the movie that she was a man before, and so everybody had kissed her, and so now everybody's disgusted, basically.
And
That's the thing,
and Jim Carrey ends up puking into a toilet for a minute.
But it
and
comes in a lot of movies. Yeah, it's in a lot.
And you know what that movie, that documentary made me realize was I was so conditioned my entire life to basically the fact that I have to constantly apologize for my existence.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that is something I was never aware of, how much I was myself shaped by watching all of these movies that I liked as well, but nowadays don't want to watch anymore.
Yeah.
But it was like, I was so shaped by that, and by constantly feeling like a fraud, like a liar, like I need to explain myself, defend myself, apologize that I even exist. And I was never even aware I was doing that.
Yeah.
The conditioning goes so deep, it's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because I was wondering, like, because isn't the point, well, not the point, but isn't it so much easier to just, when you transition because you feel like that gender, and you want to present as that gender, and so
Yes.
Doesn't it defeat the purpose constantly having, in quotation marks, to say, oh, I used to be? Doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose?
Yeah, well, and plus also in reality you never used to be,
No, that's
like
true.
your soul
Exactly,
your soul was always who you are.
Yeah.
It's just basically your packaging didn't fit your soul. And so many people always get that wrong still to this day, that they're like, oh, and then this person chose to be a woman, or this person chose to be a man.
Yeah.
That's not something you choose. It's the same thing when somebody is gay or lesbian. They're born that way, You don't choose to be that. You just are. And nobody, and in order to transition as a transgender person, you have to jump through so many bureaucratic hoops and emotional challenges. Nobody in their right mind would ever do that voluntarily just because it's a phase or a choice,
Yeah.
So it's very, I mean, that would be very counterproductive, like what you just said. But I think really a lot of people from my generation now, when I sometimes talk to younger transgender people, I realize, oh yeah, they don't feel so defensive as we used to do. But I mean, in our time, I mean, it was really, really difficult. And when they started having transgender people in talk shows, it was mostly only the very extreme cases.
Yeah,
And then,
it was to laugh at them.
The flamboyant
It was to
ones.
laugh at them as well.
Like,
yes.
Yeah.
And it actually hurt us, the rest of the transgender community, because for many years, whenever I applied for a job, it was quite difficult, because whenever I said I'm transgender, all people could think of was what they had seen in the talk shows. And then they thought, oh God, another one of those freaks. We don't want that here, And they didn't realize I am a person like everybody else, just a regular guy with a little bit of a different body, because I didn't get the right cards and was born with a body that actually fit my soul. But, I mean, other than that, I'm pretty much a guy like everyone else, with the added advantage that due to having been raised and grown up in the body of a girl, I have far more sensitivity for the needs of women than any other man will ever have, probably, because I just see so clearly what was wrong, because it happened to me as well. And so I'm very aware to not do the same thing. Like, for example, that's a very banal example, but I would never whistle after a woman in the street. It's so disrespectful. And I was whistled after so many times, and I found it so disgusting that I would never, ever do that myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I still want to ask, though, because now that you do present as a man, and this is what you have been all along, why is it so, I mean, I'm going to generalize it. Why is it so important for transgender people to let other people know that they are then transgender? Isn't the end game being the change?
It is, and it's actually, honestly, I think, I don't know. I mean, I can only talk about myself.
Sure,
I don't
yeah.
want to generalize and talk
Okay.
about what other transgender people do. I would love to not have to mention it. But the
Okay.
problem is that there's so many little things in everyday life where you're automatically outed, and often it's dangerous.
Huh. Okay.
You know,
Oh, okay.
like I let's say I'm on an outing with the office and everybody's doing a wellness day and everybody is running around in their swim shorts in bathing suits.
Okay, yeah, in that
Then
regard. Yeah, yeah.
everybody sees my scars, and then I mean now I'm openly out all the time anyways because I exactly want to. It's exactly to avoid these kind of things. Or let's say I want a massage or I want to go to the sauna, which is not really possible. Or let's say I am in a foreign country like Macau, where I lived, where if the police catches you with a little bit of an alcohol level while driving, they throw you in jail during the night.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'll get back out of there alive. So
Yeah.
I need to know that my company knows and HR knows, and that they will come and rescue me if that happens to me.
Huh.
Yeah.
Or
Okay,
let's
okay.
say I work abroad and it's not such a tolerant political situation towards transgender people. I get sick, I need to go to the hospital. Then I
Okay.
also need to know that I have someone who will back me up and make sure I get the same medical treatment like everybody else. And I don't just get stashed in a back room until I die, you know? So it's like there's a lot of situations where, well, maybe nowadays, you know, but even the surgeries are still not perfect. You know, you'll always show signs of being transgender. And I'm even somebody who, if I don't take my clothes off, you won't even see it. But there's a lot of transgender people, especially male to female, who maybe, I mean, one friend of mine, for example, she is transgender and she used to be an athlete. And she's
Yeah.
enormously tall, wide shoulders, big Adam's apple. You can see from a mile away that she's transgender, and she keeps getting beaten up in the subway,
Oh God.
for example. And so I think, you know, and for example, she had to really very openly address the entire subject with her company because she wanted to have taxi vouchers during the day as well, not just at night, because she just did not feel safe coming and going to work on public transport. And so, yeah, I think that's why, you know, it's so important to keep talking about it and to put it out in the open, because I really need, in certain situations, I need to know someone has my back.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I get it
It's
now.
like, yeah, it's the fear runs deep because the prejudice and the hate still runs so deep. Like
Yeah.
it's a
And
reaction, obviously, to
yeah.
the circumstances. Yeah.
And in a lot of countries, people still get stoned to death because they're transgender. You know, like
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you look at Transgender Day of Remembrance, there's still known cases only. So there's a dark number that we never know about, but known cases only is every year around 1,500 people who get killed in horrible ways just because they are who they are.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so, because I'm a person who wants to have his freedom and I want to work wherever I want to work and I want to have the same rights like everybody else, I then need to make sure if I go into a country where it's not quite so safe, like now I'm in Switzerland, I'm okay. I would not have to mention things to anybody, I'm
Yeah, that's what
sure.
I was wondering, like
Yeah,
more in well, our current situation in Western
yeah.
Europe, you know, that should now be okay, I guess.
Not
And that's,
really.
well,
Look at,
like you're saying, subway, you know, being beaten up in the
yeah.
subway.
I think
And
actually I think it's currently getting worse. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong,
that's,
Oh,
but
really?
yeah.
no, you're
Yeah.
right. Yep.
What's
It's
going
getting
Because, I
on?
mean,
worse.
Why?
in Germany,
I thought we were getting better.
Well, no, it's currently getting worse, I think, because in Germany, specifically, the far right movement is getting stronger again.
Oh,
Also,
okay.
in France, the far right
Yes.
is getting stronger.
Okay,
so
political
people with
fluctuations,
prejudices, they
Italy
are
as well.
gaining their voices back, as in they are daring to do more because they feel like they are being supported more. So it's I think it was getting
And in
better.
the UK,
But,
the UK as well, is a
yes.
huge lobby against transgender people. So, it's like
Why?
it's really not
Why?
so safe on the streets anymore or anywhere.
Yeah.
And so,
I just don't get, I just don't understand, because we were going in the right direction and then all of a sudden they turn it back. There's no profit in this for them. I mean, there's no monetary. I don't see why. I just don't see why.
I think it's just this very human reaction of being afraid of something you don't understand.
Yes.
As
Okay.
simple as that. I think that is underlying everything, that people are just, they're freaked out by it. And then, I mean, transgender people and non-binary, non-conforming people have always existed. I mean, all indigenous peoples on this planet have accepted more than one gender, some of them up to 9 gender. Some of them were dealing with this subject completely open. For them, it was natural. It was us, basically the Catholics, who went out into the world from Europe and
It's
colonized
religion.
the world.
It's religion.
Who,
It's definitely.
and we turned the world from the non-binary to the binary.
Yeah.
And now we're basically relearning something that has always existed, and we're sort of going, but because we're relearning it, a lot of people now, the more people come out, the more people dare to come out. And now that it's in everywhere on the internet and in every news media, children can at a very young age reflect themselves and realize, because when I grew up, I knew when I was 3 years old that I was a boy, but I couldn't really explain why. And that there was no precedent, there was nothing to reflect myself against, so I couldn't explain myself. And then as a teenager, and when I got older, then there started to be mentions in the media, and then I could reflect myself and I could explain to others what was going on. But nowadays, all the children have that. So a lot of them, they do what I did. They realize with 3, 4 years old, oh my God, I have a body that doesn't fit to my soul. And I feel extremely unbalanced and unhappy because of that. I need to make that right. And they start saying it very, very early. But so to people who are not informed, it seems like there is this trend or this invasion of transgender people all of a sudden. And it scares the shit out of them, of course. I understand that, but I think it really is based on being misinformed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And like you said, Dana, there is no advantage for them in opposing this. There's actually no danger to them in just letting people be who they are. I mean, I always say, I get sometimes confused as well with pronouns, and I stumble over they, them, and stuff like that. But my golden rule is the only person who really knows who you are is you. And if you inform me of who you are, then I just need to take that the way you tell me.
Yeah.
And I don't need to tell you who you are, because you know the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's nice. That's a really great quote. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
We want to ask you, we've been talking about it a little bit already, with what happened once you changed, your presentation. So what changed once you presented as a man? How did people treat you differently? I'm probably most talking about, how did men treat you differently?
But it would also be interesting to see how women treat you.
How women,
because,
yes, obviously. Yes,
you also
yes.
have internalized misogyny.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was a big change, like everything, but on so many levels, like little everyday things, like all of a sudden nobody offered to carry my suitcase when it was very heavy, for example, or nobody held open the door for me anymore, but also nobody was giving me strange looks or whistling after me on the street, thankfully. But then also, like, I remember I had a really good lesbian friend, and she immediately, when I came out to her, said she wanted nothing to do with me anymore because she hates men, and now I'm one of those guys wearing military boots, and I never wore any military boots, just
What?
for the record.
Oh, yeah.
But she had
How?
this stereotype in her head, and she was like, I don't want anything to do with you anymore now. You're the enemy now. And I was like, okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And
Yeah.
so there were so
That's
many things.
unexpected.
No, actually,
Very much.
like it's. Sorry to interrupt. It's actually my dad is also. He's a bit older than you. He's in his 60s, early 60s, and he had. They now have a relatively diverse workplace, but for a long time, the only person they had who was queer in their in his team specifically was a lesbian, and she hated men, like all men. And so he, obviously having only had this one experience really with lesbians, was like, oh no, lesbians hate all men, like I don't like lesbians.
Generalized
right?
it, yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
like, you know, and like now he
Yeah.
understands and he knows better, but it's just
Yeah.
I think it did exist more back in
It can
the
be
day,
shocking.
I think. Yeah.
It can be shocking. I understand your dad. Like, and I think, you know, whenever we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we sometimes forget that within the societal
letters.
groups where we are a little bit on the fringe, or we are a little bit sidelined, you know, it's also important to be diverse and open towards each other. And it's often, you know, I always feel it has to be mutual respect. I cannot expect somebody to respect me if I'm not willing to extend the same favor, you know, and extend the same openness as well. And I'm really trying to be that person who, you know, but I mean, I've also, like I mentioned earlier, when I was first confronted by all those soldiers and oil platform workers at the theater, I freaked out because I immediately had the prejudice that they would all hate me and never accept me, which was actually not true. You know, so I did the same thing. And I think that's something where we really need to check ourselves all the time and work on our openness and not falling into these stereotypes. But I mean, to get back to your questions, when I transitioned, it was so obvious, you know, the societal roles of men and women. It was so very obvious. I also, all of a sudden, I felt, until I mentioned I'm transgender, it was usually towards the end of the interview, I felt far more taken seriously during interviews, for example. And you know, when I talked with people in a meeting, I felt they were listening more, which I thought was actually freaky, because they should listen. I mean, they should listen to me as well when I'm in a female body, right? They shouldn't, this should not matter. And it should,
No.
what I say should matter, not what I look like. But yeah, so there was a lot of these things happening, and just like these little common courtesies, or people, you know, assuming certain things, I could feel like, yeah, how it very much shifted. But overall, I felt when I aligned my body with my soul, I felt that as soon as people were actually perceiving me on a daily basis as a man, I felt safer, I felt more taken serious, and like there was more self-confidence through that.
And just before that, were you in a meeting as a woman? Also, did you, how do I say this? Let me think about that for a second. Because before you transition, you think or maybe hope that you are being taken seriously as a woman in this meeting. X time after, you say, I found that they were taking me more seriously, but you thought before that you were being taken seriously already. But turns out that the feeling afterwards made you realize that wasn't really the case.
Yes, I just realized I had to work much harder for it.
Okay.
You know, like I mean, it was just when people were still perceiving me as a woman, I just I felt I had to really prove myself double as hard.
Yeah, yeah, we don't realize it anymore, I guess, because
Yeah.
you're just all the time in
Oh
the
no,
thing.
actually, I constantly, because I have so much to
Yeah.
do with people in construction. I have a lot to
Oh,
do with
yes.
construction workers right now, and
Right.
actually, recently I had a really good example of somebody who was very respectful and very like actually took me seriously. So I'm obviously not just a little woman, but also I am still look very young. I am very young, but I also look very young. I look younger than I am. So people don't take me seriously. I literally, every time I have to be like, no, actually, you need to send the bill to me. And they're like, oh, where do I send the bill to? I'm like, to me. So yeah, no, I
Yeah.
constantly experience that. So it is, I
You're
think
right.
in other bits, yes.
You're
it's-
actually right. Now that you're
Yeah.
saying that, it just happens all the time, so you don't realize it
Yeah,
anymore.
even in a restaurant, Dana, if you think about it, most of the time, if you sit in a restaurant with a guy, the waiter will
Bring
automatically
the
bring the bill to
bill
the
to the
guy,
guy.
right?
I know. So
Still in this day and age,
Yeah.
they still do that.
that's true. I'm redecorating my bedroom. So we I had some painters come and have a look, and then they all made like an offer and everything, and then they all want to know to whom they can make the offer to, and I'm like, okay, to me, and then I say my name, and then they write it down, and then my boyfriend is there because, well, he's around the house, so sometimes he comes down and he's like, okay, he'll sit in the meeting, but he doesn't really say a lot because I know which color I want, and I know, and it's my house also, so I will be paying for it, and that's that. And they always want to know what his name is so they can put him on the offer as well, and like, oh, and like the invoice. So now that you mention it, I realize it. But you see how ingrained this is. I don't even realize that they're doing this until you tell me, and then like, oh yeah,
It happens.
oh yeah.
It happens all the time. My parents and I played a trick on some people in a restaurant when we were on holiday, because for some reason I was carrying the money, I don't remember why, but I was, and I was like, oh, should I just keep it? Should I just pay? Like, and my parents were like, yes, let's see how they react, right? And so we were at this restaurant, and they came to give us the bill, and I was like, yes, the bill's over here, because they turned to my father, and then they turned to my mother, and then they turned to my brother, who was also there, and he's older than me, and I was like, no, I obviously have the money in front of me, so I will be paying. And it wasn't like, I don't think they were lovely people. It's not like, I don't think it's just so
it's inside.
ingrained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
So
that's actually something very important you're saying there, Micah. I think a lot of people, tend to immediately assume ill intent. I think often it's really not that. It's something automatic where people just don't think, and they often don't mean it badly, and all it takes to gently maybe remind them and be like, you know what, are you actually realizing you're doing that? That is not so cool. And often if you do that, they really start changing their behavior. So I think, it's just really important to not automatically be like, oh my God, and why did he or she do that? And that's horrible. And, because, often if you say something, they'll be like, oops, I'm so sorry. I did not really realizing I was doing that.
Yeah.
It's just many, many decades of being conditioned that we are slowly unlearning.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's also patterns of speech as well that are just nowadays it's like, that could come across wrong, right? And then you kind of really have to actively change your pattern of speech, and then you've got people saying like, oh, you can't say anything anymore these days, and it's like, yeah, well, you can. But you maybe shouldn't.
Yes.
Good one.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Well, about words, we heard about, like, you have gender affirmation or gender reassignment. So I saw on your website that you chose to use gender reassignment, but what is the difference? How should we be using those terminologies? Is there something we should be careful with in that regard?
I think reassignment is really when you physically also make all the changes, and affirmation doesn't necessarily mean all the physical changes are being done as well.
Okay.
Honestly, I think, I don't know. I mean, for me, it's always like all the terminology. I mean, like you said, Micah, it's important, to try to be informed and do it right. But it also changes all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, in my lifetime, it's already changed like 20 times. So often that I, in between, didn't even really know anymore how I'm supposed to say things. And I should know,
Yeah.
because
We're looking to you for guidance.
yeah, but I sometimes didn't even know. I think whenever in doubt, ask the person directly, because sometimes the individuals maybe also prefer different ways of being addressed or of these terms being used. So I would really always just do what you just did and just sort of ask. And I mean, for me, from the very beginning, I always felt like a boy. I felt like a man. I knew I was a man. And so for me, for example, the pronouns he, him are absolutely natural, but I wouldn't even use them or advertise them or put them under any signatures because I know who I am. And I'm at a point in my life where I don't really care if other people, are more informed about that or not. But what I do nowadays is I always add he, him to all my signatures because not for me. I added to signal to all the people that are not out yet or are maybe currently questioning their gender identity and feel insecure, to signal to them, hey, I'm aware and I can understand you. And if you need an ally, you can come to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
get
And
that.
that's my reason. And that's also why I try to keep on top of all the terminology. But honestly, Dana, I am probably as lost as everybody else is.
Yeah, it's
very
really
reassuring.
hard. Yeah, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
what am I supposed to say? Like you say, yeah, just open communication,
Yeah.
and really showing the other person that there's no ill intent, that you're
Yes.
an ally and you want to be educated, really. You want to learn and
Yes.
move
Yeah.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same for women. I mean, over the years, I mean, nowadays it's quite normal to, always, at least in German, that is a very complicated process that you always put the male and female form at the same time.
Yeah.
But I remember times where there were women who didn't want that and others did. And then I always asked them, what do you prefer? Do you want me to use the female form specifically, or is it okay if I use the general form, which sounds male but sort of used to encompass everything? And some of them were much more happy using the more generalized, but then sort of male form, and others wanted a very clear distinction. And I think I do it with everybody. Even stuff like how do I pronounce people's names, working in an international work environment. I always, when I see something very complicated in front of my eyes, I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna butcher that name. I'm gonna just ask them, and then I'm like, okay, could you just teach me how to pronounce your name right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes
Yeah,
they
I do
say like,
that.
oh, it's not that important. And I'm like, no, actually, I think it is important.
It
And I would
is.
like to extend the courtesy to you to pronounce it right from the
Yeah.
start,
Yeah.
Yeah,
But so, yeah,
absolutely.
I think open communication is the key in all of those things, because even if we now go through an explanation of all the, for example, transgender and non-binary terminologies, probably in 6 months they'll change
Yeah,
already.
that's true.
So, it's like it's really this, and also pronouns. I mean, we are at the moment dealing with going back to, like I said, relearning something, but without having the proper vocabulary in any language to actually even say it right. I mean, German is the worst.
Oh,
Yeah.
People are so lost in the German language. They are using Finnish pronouns, Swedish pronouns, no pronouns,
Really?
an
So
asterisk
funny.
instead of pronouns, a
True.
zero
Yeah.
instead of pronouns, because they don't know how to actually be able to express their identity, because there are no words in our
Yeah.
current vocabulary to encompass all of that, because the world has been so binary for so long,
Yeah.
or been pressed into that, that now people are literally at a loss for words.
Yeah, it's in
And
the language.
yeah,
French has that as well, very much. Yeah,
yeah,
that it's very
Yeah.
male or female, and you have to
Yeah.
choose. So,
Like,
Yeah.
we do have neutral in German, but not for people.
not for people.
So
Yeah.
not like
yeah.
pronouns for
And
people. We
sometimes in
don't.
German, Micah, have you heard that too? They use es, which is it.
Yeah. Oh my
That's
God. No, that's
horrible.
awful.
It.
That
Yeah,
is,
because it
yeah,
dehumanizes completely.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
Right?
not
yeah,
the solution.
It's like I don't know. Okay, no, that's a bad
yeah,
example. But no, it's just very it's no,
yeah.
very
I
disrespectful
always
as well.
shudder when I hear that.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
don't use that. That's
yeah,
really bad.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think what I'm trying to say is really we're all in this learning process, and we need to be kind to one another and help each other, and like and that's why it's so important to
Yeah.
always openly ask and be there for each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there anything you would like want our listeners to know specifically? So maybe just something that is most important to you.
I think, I mean, specifically thinking that we were talking about the entertainment industry as well. I think, I mean, I would really like to, impart on anybody in the entertainment industry to not accept the status quo. I know these are very small communities and you want that job, but any job you have to go through a huge amount of discrimination to get is not okay. And the problem is this: the longer we stay silent, and there's so much sexual harassment as well in these industries. I witnessed some of that myself as well. And it's like when people don't say anything because they're so afraid that then afterwards in that small community, they're being labeled as difficult to work with. And then nobody wants to hire them anymore. But I mean, to put that very clear, that is bullshit because that should not happen. You should not have to bend yourself. You should not like have to allow yourself to be sexually harassed in order to get a job. I mean, this is not the dark ages anymore, or it shouldn't be. And I really think it's so important to not stay quiet and to not, be you, don't hide, and don't let people treat you that way. And then look for, like, who can you talk to, and look for support within your own ranks as well, or anything you can do so we can break these very toxic things that are still happening.
Yeah.
Supporting each other is also so important. A lot of people are still their own island. And I always feel like, if you really want to be a true ally to everybody around you, you need to be an ally also when these people are not in the room. So if,
Yeah.
and often people are trying to be polite, somebody makes a very stupid, discriminating joke, everybody's like, and no, you should not do that. At that moment, you should speak up and have the courage to say, and you can say it very quietly, there's no need for aggression, but speak up and say, you know what, this joke, sorry,
This job, I don't want it.
yeah, exactly. I don't want it. No, this joke is not funny,
Yeah.
and it's really discriminating. And for example, our team member who is right now not in the room would really be hurt if
Yeah.
he or she or they would hear you say that. And I think that it's so important that we stand up for each other all the time as well, because I think that's one way of breaking this. But there's still this tendency of not speaking up, or of just laughing automatically when somebody says something funny, which is not
Laughing
really
it off.
funny.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is really, and I mean, one colleague of mine said it so beautiful. beautifully last year during Pride Month. He posted something in LinkedIn and he said, don't go where you're merely accepted, go where you are valued and where you're celebrated and appreciated. And I think nowadays also we have more choice, so which is why I would even more ask everybody, don't accept too much, don't endure too much. It's not necessary. There is a lot of really crap companies out there that will not appreciate you, and also in your private life there will be situations that will be crap. But there's a lot of other people who will take you exactly who you are. There is a lot of companies that will appreciate you exactly as who you are. Leave those places that don't do and go to the places that do.
All right. Well, on
Yeah.
that note,
Yeah,
I want to thank you very much for
Yes.
coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was really, I loved our discourse. It was so interesting for me as well. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. And where can people find you, reach out to you? When is your next panel, for example? Tell us.
I just had one in Paris 2 days ago, and then 2 more in June. I have a website, liamklenk.com, where people can also contact me via contact form and also book me as a speaker if they want to. And then if anybody is interested in reading my book, that is still available almost everywhere as ebook. And print version, unfortunately, only print on demand, I think, through Amazon.com. And then there's still copies floating around, which you can find, which you can buy. But yeah, ebook, it is available still. But yeah,
cool.
the easiest way to find me is through the website. And there is also all the links for my Instagram page and my Facebook page, etc. So
Amazing. Yeah, we'll leave those in the show notes.
Yeah.
And on that note, that is all for today. Thank you for tuning into Unboxing Women, everybody. If you've ever had an experience that you want to share with us, send us a DM or tag us in your post with the hashtag #suchabitch, or send us an email on suchabitch@unboxingwomen.com. Don't forget to drop us a like on Instagram or wherever you're listening to us. Today's guest has been Liam Klenk. Thank you for coming on the show. It was really great to have you.
Thank you so much.
thank you.